Beltway. Good Thursday morning to you, the morning of the draft. We've been waiting for the NFL draft to give us a little diversion forever, but in the morning, let's cover some serious stuff. I'm joined by Congressman Michael Waltz. He represents Florida's 6th congressional district. He's a freshman, but I like to have him on because he's the only Green Beret who's ever been elected to Congress. He's a veteran of the war in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and I'm glad to have you back, Congressman. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Hugh. Good to be with you.
Now, I'm going to have on your colleagues Greg Walden and Mike McCaul, and I want to ask them all the same question set because I want to compare and contrast answers across Oregon versus Texas versus Florida. My first question is, do you think the Communist Chinese Party of the People's Republic of China owe money damages to everyone injured or dead as a result of this virus?
Yes. I do.
How do we go?
I think we need to have a wake-up call in America. I hope this is a silver lining coming through all of this, that we truly appreciate and understand that we are in a Cold War with China. The Chinese Communist Party has been in one with us for some time. They fully intend to replace America as the world's lone superpower. And we have never before, Hugh, I think this is a thing we don't fully grasp yet as a nation. We have never faced an adversary like this before, where their economy is as big, or by some measures, bigger than ours. And they are seeking to eclipse us by essentially vacuuming up data and technology and intellectual property. And if they can't do it by taking it through the 400,000 students they send here every year, if they can't do it through research, then they're doing it through outright stealing it, through cyber theft. And if they can't do it that way, then they just buy it through very aggressive mergers and acquisitions in terms of buying up distressed companies, which actually they've just launched another buying spree as we speak. And I'm in Washington introducing legislation today to stop a lot of this.
The Wall Street Journal editorialized yesterday that we will see a defense buildup directed specifically against the PRC, the People's Liberation Army and Navy, the PLARN. Do you expect that to be part of any Phase 5 of the COVID rescue package? That means increased spending for America's defense sector and the tools especially that we need to not go to war with, but to deter war with the CCP.
Well, I think that'll be part of the defense bill that we're working on. It's set to be introduced in May. But Hugh, and I'd love to talk to you more about this and longer. We need to think about this very differently. This is much more economic warfare, technological warfare, how China is taking over international institutions like the UN and the WHO, a counter to the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm on armed services. I want our military to have everything it needs. I've been asking some key officials in the Pentagon, what affects Chinese Communist Party thinking more? Having a few more bombers, having another submarine in the Pacific, or a Uyghur uprising in the West, and or another Hong Kong, or cut off access to American capital. And I think I'm utterly convinced it's the latter. We're looking at closing down Bagram Air Base as a withdrawal from Afghanistan. But yes, that's the only air base we have on China's western flank. So I'm encouraged that the Pentagon has shifted as part of the national defense strategy to focus on China, but they're still doing it very conventionally by counting tanks and counting ships and trying to get a few more boots on the ground. For example, we're looking at drawing down in Africa to add a few more 100 troops to Guam, but yet it's in Africa where we have terrorism, China, Russia, and the future of natural resources and rare earth minerals in terms of competition. I do believe. So yes, but those are the pieces that. But I don't think we've really settled on the strategy yet.
I do believe people should read Kissinger's on China because there is a pattern in the CCP of sudden, unexpected, very hostile, aggressive, violent actions when they are least expected. There is a pattern through history with India, with the war with Vietnam, with the seizure of Tibet. There is a pattern there that people should be aware of. Second question on the domestic side, Congressman Waltz.
Yes.
American business, when they open up, as part of Phase 5 rescue, they're going to need liability protection. I think you have to preempt the state laws on tort so that the plaintiffs bar in America does not start suing everyone for COVID-related claims because there's no causation here. The causation goes back to the CCP. We need to protect businesses as they reopen. Do you think you can get bipartisan support for keeping businesses free from swarms of plaintiffs' lawyers that will eat up their ability to recover?
I don't know how much bipartisan support we will get. I mean, most trial attorneys I know, most ambulance chasers are Democrats, unfortunately. But I'm with you 200%. I was a business owner as well, built a company from scratch, up to several hundred employees, and we can't have a situation where businesses that are just struggling to keep their nose above water are then facing a mountain of legal fees because they didn't wipe the counter in the right way. You can't sue someone for H1N1. You can't sue someone because you're an employee that got the flu. And I've raised this with the White House a couple of times now, and they say they're absolutely working on it and 100% supportive. I'm disappointed we don't have that in this package. The other thing I'm disappointed about, Hugh, is we don't just have a tax holiday. It befuddles me that we are trying to collect trillions of dollars still from companies and individuals that are barely getting by just to redistribute it through inefficient bureaucracy and government IT programs, losing about 20% on the dollar in the meantime, to then try to push it back out. The Treasury has done, I think, a great job with PPP, with the Paycheck Protection Program. There have been but I'm getting an avalanche of calls from businesses in my district in Florida that still haven't received it. We're going to spend another couple of $100 billion now on the program, but I just don't think the federal government can print their way out of this problem. We have to.
Well, as I studied it,
we need to leave the tax. We need to leave the tax dollars where they sit, which is in people's pockets. And I don't understand why we're collecting it and redistributing it.
Well, now, Congressman, putting back your Green Beret days, if you could see someone coming, you could set up an ambush, right? Well, the states are coming. They're coming for money. And I don't mean to ambush them. I mean to get them to think straight about their horrific financial states, if they're Connecticut or Illinois or California. And as they look at the abyss, and I mean, these states are going to fall into the abyss. I talked about this with Leader McConnell yesterday. They will have to get money from the federal government, and the federal government is in a position to demand reform. They are in a position to demand preemption on tort liability. They are in a position to demand a bankruptcy proceeding so that they can shed pension obligations that are ridiculous. I mean, do you believe, how many are you put in the Army, Colonel?
I'm still going, and I'm on 24 now.
24. Okay. Yesterday I said to the leader, I do not believe any public employee in the United States, not anyone, not a doctor, not a teacher, not anybody, not a football coach, should ever receive a retirement pension higher than that received by a retired Army or Marine Corps colonel or Navy captain. I believe that ought to be the national cap. There's no way that anyone deserves more than we are paying people who put that long in the, but a lot of people are. And I think it is time, and the bankruptcy proceedings would allow the states to shed these ridiculous contracts they've entered into and to get back to doing business like the states. Do you think this is the leverage point? I don't want to use the ambush term because Media Matters will say ambush the states, but I know that they need money. If they give money, they ought to give us reform.
Couldn't agree more, Hugh. Well said. Well said, and this is obviously going to have to come out of the Senate. It will not in 100 years ever come from Nancy Pelosi.
But they do know, that they're going to come for money. They absolutely need money. Not Florida. I think your state's good. They're going to come for money.
Yeah, no, they are. But even in places like Florida, obviously state and local budgets have to be balanced. They're being hit with a double whammy right now of crashing revenues. Because of where the economy is going, coupled with increasing costs. We already passed some funds to help with the cost, but the revenue delta, I mean, the states are going to have to start cutting services they provide just as you have people that desperately need them. And the piece that I'm concerned about is talking to some of my local governments that are contemplating who they're going to lay off in terms of first responders and others, or at least furlough. So
It's
there
cardiac
are some
arrest.
legitimate needs, but
Yeah.
some of these states have just made horrific decisions. I mean, they're looking to bail out the post office. They're looking to bail out some of these union pension plans. You are going to see a spending spree attempt like we've never seen in modern American history on this Phase 4 package, and it has a lot of us fiscal conservatives choking.
Do you know that in Connecticut, Congressman, the governor won't even delay a 5.5% pay increase that government employees negotiated last summer, and they got a 5.5% hike the year before and a $2,000 bonus the year before that, and they can't be laid off until 2021. I don't know that we give Connecticut a freaking dime. They're the worst run state in America.
Well, and we could go down the list of New York and Illinois and all of the other
California
states that are. Yeah, well, they're all my new neighbors now as they're moving down to Florida here.
Oh, that's true. Be careful about that.
And that has been accelerated since the SALT provisions went into tax reform, where you can't double dip, and the states have to be held accountable for their mismanagement. I'm with you 200%.
Well, when they come knocking, I hope you get a laundry list of reform. I know that they are in cardiac arrest. We need teachers, we need first responders, we need people to work the water pipes, etc. But my gosh, we've got to get some reform. Congressman Michael Waltz, a quick question. You're on Sea Power. You heard the president last night tell the Iranians very clearly, if they come near our ships, we will sink them. Do you think that's going to happen?
That will take them down? Yes, I do.
Yes.
But I think the Iranians are deterred by strength and by a clear message, and they're emboldened by weakness. And if anything, this president is not weak. So I think they absolutely will get the message. And in terms of reform, Hugh, I'm entering a bill today that will prevent our thrift savings plan, our federal retirement service that the military contributes to, from investing in Chinese companies, which they have been doing for years now. The U.S. military has been indirectly funding the Chinese military through their retirement accounts. All kinds of reforms we're going to need as a result of this, and I hope the appetite's there for it.
Make a list, because they're going to have to get a bailout, and when they do, attach the conditions. Congressman Michael Waltz, thank you, sir. Thank you, Colonel. Come back again. Time for me to tell you about This America, ReliefFactor.com. I can't brag about yesterday. I didn't do anything yesterday. I didn't do a thing. I went 10.5 miles on Tuesday, so yesterday I sat around and did my draft lifts. But today I will go out after the show, but I'll have my Relief Factor, right here, my 4 pills, and my lukewarm coffee. Coach Meyer, if you're listening, the coffee's actually pretty warm this morning. Urban always gets a chuckle out of my lukewarm coffee. In California, I got a coffee warmer, but not here. And I'm sure Coach Meyer will be watching tonight. I'll be watching tonight when number 10 comes around. The best left tackle on the board. Don't trade down. Take the best left tackle on the board and take ReliefFactor.com. Advice for the Browns, advice for you. Best left tackle on the board, Relief Factor every day. $19.95. Icarian, Kirkman, Resveratrol, and Omega. Take it every day. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. Coming up after the break, Dr. Michael Oren. They've got a government in Israel, finally. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Michael Oren joins me from Israel just as the new government begins a fundamental rewrite of Israel's, quote, basic law. It's a huge moment in the history of the Jewish state. Dr. Michael Oren joins me, former ambassador of Israel to the United States, former deputy minister in the government. Dr. Oren, can you explain to Americans why this is such an important moment? I think what's going on in the Knesset is not unlike sort of a 1789, quasi-1789 moment.
Yeah, it depends on which side of the guillotine you stand in here. Because, part of the people who were supporting Benny Gantz as the person who was going to take down Benjamin Netanyahu are grievously disappointed and embittered, though the majority of the population, according to polls, is very supportive of this national emergency unity government. So what does it mean? You have to change a couple of basic laws. Israel does not have a constitution. Like Great Britain, has a collection of basic laws. Some of those basic laws have to be changed now to enable a prime minister who is indicted to remain a shadow prime minister if he is found guilty, to enable another prime minister to come and take his place, to enable 36 ministers to take the seat, which creates a very interesting legislative challenge because if you are a minister or a deputy minister, you cannot advance legislation. You cannot vote in committee. So there's simply not enough parliamentarians to pass laws. So we may have to go to what's called the Norwegian law. You ever heard of it?
No.
There's the small Norwegian law and the big Norwegian law. In the past, we've had the small Norwegian law. Now we're going to the big one. What does it mean simply? In Norway, if you are a member of a party and you are elected to the government and you become a government minister, you can resign your seat in parliament, remain a minister, and then have the next person on the list move up and take your place. So
I see. So you can staff the government and keep the coalition.
And keep the coalition. And in terms of actually running a ministry, it's actually nice to have a minister who can devote his time full time to running the ministry and not being, kept in filibusters till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's a good idea. But it also creates a constitutional issue because people who voted for blue and right may have voted for the first, say, 35 people on that list, but didn't necessarily vote for number 50 on the list. And number 50 on the list would come in under the big Norwegian law.
Wow. This is very tricky. I see the coalition might be 72 members of the Knesset. So they ought to be able to get through. But will the Supreme Court stand by, and does it matter? Will they get rolled if they try and get in the way of this, Michael Oren?
I think they're going to get rolled to try to do it. I think it'll be the bridge too far. It'll be jumping the shark, whatever metaphor you want to use. The Supreme Court is now in a tense situation vis-a-vis the legislature. The legislature accusing the Supreme Court of exceeding its authority, its prerogatives, and the answer of the legislators is to say to the Supreme Court, hey, who elected you guys? And as I said on this program before, unlike in the United States, where you have the ability to influence the composition of your Supreme Court twice by voting for president and voting for the Senate, in Israel we have neither. The Supreme Court judges are chosen by jurists, including by sitting Supreme Court justices. So the claim that the Supreme Court is acting without authority from the people actually has more weight in this country, in your country, than it does in this country. We're acting without authority, acting in this country than it is in your country. So they are, not to mix the metaphors, they're walking on some thin ice here.
All right, but so, Ambassador, we've spent months asking when will Israel have the next government. So immediately, of course, the question is how long will it last? And the second question is, are you going to join it in any capacity? Those two questions, we got a minute and a half.
Let's see. If the phone rings and I'm called to the flag, I'll go to the flag. I always say I'm not in an elected position now, but there are other positions to be filled. The UN ambassador for one. And I think first of all, I think this government is a good thing. It's not without problems, but it's a good thing. It can handle the crisis. More importantly, perhaps now it can handle our recovery. And looking down the line, it can interact with the Trump administration on the Middle East peace plan, which I think is an historic opportunity for us.
And will it last the 36 months it is allotted?
Well, if you look over the course of our governments over the last, say, 72 years, almost none of them have lived out their full 4-year longevity. So the chances aren't great. But who would have thought a year and a half ago that we'd have this type of government, that Benny Gantz would be sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu in a rotational government? Who would have thought? We're in the land of prophecy. The prophecy has its limits here.
I want to go back to the question of Dr. Oren and the UN. And I know I don't want to embarrass you. I know you can't disclose confidences, but does everyone appreciate the necessity of explaining Israel to the world? I know some people don't in Israel because I've been there a couple of times, but it just seems to me that is a vital place for Israel to make its case to the world in a way that Abba Eban used to do.
I certainly agree with you. There's a certain amount of bitterness in this country that says, especially among young people, you'd be surprised, to say, listen, the world's going to hate us anyway. There's anti-Semitism out here. No matter how much we try to explain ourselves, we're still going to come out on the short end. I profoundly disagree. And yes, I think there's an extreme case to be made, a poignant case to be made for Israel's ability to explain itself in the UN, in front of the international media and other international forums.
Yeah, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Jean Kirkpatrick, the UN, Adlai Stevenson, even during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is a place you need to be well represented. I hope they're thinking broadly, Dr. Oren. Come back next week and tell me if they are. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 2 of this NFL Draft Day edition during the plague of the Hugh Hewitt Show continues. General Deptula joins us next to talk about that Iranian Navy and what would it take to sink it. Don't go anywhere.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by patternsofevidence.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone in America, across everywhere that's listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm inside the Beltway on this April the 23rd in the year of the plague 2020. Coming up in this hour, Representative Greg Walden. Next hour, Mike McCaul of Texas. Chuck Todd coming along. Right now, I'm joined by Lieutenant General David Deptula, retired United States Air Force. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Certainly is a lot out there in the news, isn't there?
There is. I just had on Colonel Waltz, who's now a congressman, but he's a Green Beret. He made the comment that I want to ask you about. He said, "There's no way we should be closing Bagram. It is the closest air base we have to China's western shoulder." I have never thought of it in those terms. What do you think of that?
Well, as you said that, I'm kind of chuckling because we had a base called Manas up in Kyrgyzstan about 20 years ago, and I used that exact line that why should we close this base when it's an outpost on the west coast of China? And people weren't thinking in that context. So I applaud the congressman for highlighting that issue, and he's exactly spot on.
So he also pointed out that our competition with China is not likely to be military, but waged on many fronts. But even in a non-military confrontation, you want assets based nearby, do you not?
No, absolutely, Hugh. The whole idea is to make sure that we have outposts located in a variety of different places around the world that engage China in a way that complicates their strategic calculus, and that's one way to do it. It is the same thing with the placement of many of our forces and how we deploy them.
All right. Now, I want to play for you, General Deptula. President Trump last night gets a question about what's been going on for a few weeks now. I've been following it because I follow Navy news. The Iranian gunboats are harassing our ships in the Arab Gulf. And here's what the president got asked and answered last night.
We don't want their gunboats surrounding our boats and traveling around our boats and having a good time. We don't want them anywhere near our boats. And so you know the order I gave. I don't think I have to say it again, but I've given that order. Under the Obama administration, it was taking place all the time. Under my administration, I gave this order early on, and nothing happened. They were very nice. There was no problem. But then I noticed yesterday they did that in a much lighter form, but they did that again. I said, we're not going to stand for it. So if they do that, that's putting our ships at danger and our great crews and sailors in danger. I'm not going to let that happen. And we will. They'll shoot them out of the water.
So the U.S. military does not have to change its rules of engagement in order to follow your...
No, that's the rules of engagement. That's a threat when they get that close to our boat. And they have guns. They have very substantial weapons on those boats. But we'll shoot them out of the water.
General Deptula, what do you make of that exchange?
Well, it is a comment that I believe the Iranians need to take seriously and not repeat their provocative encounters of last week in the Persian Gulf. So he clearly is sending a deterrent message to Iran. He's provided guidance to our forces in the region, and our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines out there know how to take the right action. I mean, this boils down to the issue of, as the president mentioned, just what the Iranians are doing and to what degree does it endanger the ships. And so ultimately, the use of deadly force against an Iranian ship is going to be made by individual Navy commanders depending upon the level of threat to their ships and sailors. But the president made it very clear in his guidance that hostile, aggressive, and unsafe behavior is simply not going to be tolerated on the part of the Iranians.
Now, General Deptula, I don't think you're old enough to have been on active duty in April of 1988 when Operation Praying Mantis happened. I was in the Reagan administration.
No. I came on active duty. I came on active duty in '76, Hugh.
Okay, you and I are... you're just a year older than me. Okay, so I'm in the Reagan administration in '88, and I wake up and we've sunk the Iranian Navy. I'm not in the Department of Defense. I'm not in the White House anymore. I'm at the Office of Personnel Management. We sunk the whole damn Navy. How hard would it be to do the same thing today?
It wouldn't be. Not a problem.
How would you explain for the layman and dummies like me what that means in practice? What would do the sinking? Would it be Navy ships using surface-to-surface missiles? Would it be, or sea-to-surface missiles? Would it be the Air Force? What would it be?
Well,
Where would they come from?
It would be a combination of forces, Hugh. And look, it's you'd have to break down the disposition of where the Iranian Navy is located, and this is not a large-scale problem. But it would be a combination of actions taken on behalf of Central Command. I mean, it's interesting. People tend to talk about the services as fighting. I have to remind folks that the services don't fight. The Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines don't fight. They organize, train, and equip, and they provide component forces to a combatant commander. In this case, the commander of Central Command would organize those forces made up of elements from each of the services. So that's a definition of asymmetric warfare, is not using similar systems to attack similar systems, but to attack from a variety of different domains. And that's how this had come down.
So I assume at this moment, we've got assets all answering through Central Command in Tampa, but we have assets in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar. Right. We got them all over the place. We got ships at sea.
Right.
Somebody is organizing, I assume, Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, depending on the provocation and what happens. Am I right about that, General? And who's doing that staff?
No, absolutely right. Those plans are being put together by Central Command. J3 is normally the Director of Operations, and the J5, who's the plans individual. And so combined, they put together a variety of different contingency plans. And how close one gets to execution, one would stand up a joint task force commander who would have these different service components underneath his or her direct command to actually do the execution.
So normally I'd ask Admiral Stavridis, but I already had him on, so you get it. If you're a ship captain right now and a gunboat comes near you and it gets perilously close, or they're just trying to provoke us, do you need to call Tampa, or can you open fire?
Oh, no, you can open fire. Look, our standing rules of engagement are based on the international principle that one has the ultimate right to defend themselves. So you said a key word in your description of this hypothetical, and that is if the individuals in the ship captain views themselves in peril as a result of the potential action, those folks conducting that hostile action are toast.
Okay, that's a technical term, toast,
right.
And I'm glad you used it. Tell me about the capacity of the F-22, with which you're very familiar, to go anywhere, or the F-35, to go anywhere it wants in Iran, regardless of what their air defense capacity is. Can they hit any target? And I'm thinking of the oil refineries, because that's a regime on the edge, if they want to play this game.
Well, once again, that's one of the advantages of low observability. It makes it extraordinarily difficult for a country like Iran to know that those aircraft are there. And a matter of fact, there have been many instances where F-22s have been flying in close proximity to Iranian aircraft. They don't even know that they're there. Now, listen, these airplanes are not invisible. However, their low observability allows them to essentially penetrate anywhere in Iranian airspace without Iranians knowing that they're there. So either of those aircraft would be a key element in any kind of hostile action that might be necessary against Iran.
General Deptula, last question, 30 seconds. Would you recommend to the president, if he has to use force, that it be disproportionate, asymmetrical, like Operation Praying Mantis?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, that's the way that you deter action in the first place, is to make sure that the potential adversary understands that any action would completely endanger their survivability. And that way, and this is the difficult concept of deterrence, But the last thing we want to do is start another conflict or engage in another conflict.
Agree.
Because that's extraordinarily expensive. But deterrence is the way to avoid it. Peace through strength still resides.
General Deptula, thank you for joining us. Follow him on Twitter. He's the Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. You can follow him on Twitter at Deptula_David. Even a Steelers fan can spell that, Deptula_David. I'll be right back, America. 1-800-520-1234. What do you think? 22 minutes after the hour on draft day. I know we're in the middle of a plague, and I know thousands of Americans have died, and millions of us are cooped up in our houses and going nuts. And I know, at the far end of the bell curve of both left and right, there are crazy people out there saying stupid stuff, and you're not going to hear that here. You're going to hear the center right articulated here. Everyone's trying to do the best they can. My hat is off to Governor Newsom and to Governor Cuomo and to President Trump and to Vice President Pence. I think everyone's doing the best they can. I'm generally satisfied. There are a few nutters out there who are saying terrible things on left and right, and forget it. And enjoy tonight. We have a sporting event. Now, it doesn't involve contact. It involves brains. This is why, my phone's ringing off the hook because the Browns are checking in, I'm sure, throughout the day. I mean, it hadn't started yet, but Andrew is the new GM. He's going to have to be calling me, right? So we've got something to look forward to. For one day, the draft. I don't know what I'm going to read. Every night before I go to sleep, I kind of unwind by reading mock drafts. And there is wisdom in the crowd, and everyone says pick Andrew Thomas. So if the Browns end up with Andrew Thomas, I am a happy man when I go to sleep tonight. But then it's over. I don't know what we're going to read. Then I'll start reading mock drafts for 2021, I guess, because there isn't any baseball. We've got to get baseball back. Got to get baseball back. I don't care if they play every game back to back to back to back in the same stadium, and they all stay at the Motel 6 next door with doctors testing them every day. What do you think, Dwayne? Does that work for you? Can we just put all 32 teams in one city and just play 16 games a day in the same stadium?
You're talking about baseball? No.
Yeah, actually, we could do it in L.A. We could use Angel Stadium and Dodger Stadium.
What I will not put up with is what they're talking about doing to the game itself. The way they're trying to do it is shorten the games to 7 innings.
Yeah, I agree. I'm talking about a full season. Let's just get it started. Play double headers in as many stadiums as we know.
Count me out if we're gonna take it down to 7 inning games.
No, I'm saying play the whole season. Just identify 4 stadiums. Put all the teams near those 4 stadiums and play back to back to back to back. In San Diego, we've got Padres, Angels, Dodgers.
What do you do with the players in? Where do the players?
They all stay in the Motel 6 and they get tested every day.
For 4 months, they're going to be away from family and everybody else?
You betcha. That's like the Army.
No.
They're entertaining the country. All right, think about it.
No.
Let me check the market. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. No one listens to me, but I'm always right. I feel like Tom in Peaky Blinders. If everyone would just blanking listening to me. Let's check the markets. AndrewandTodd.com. Do you need to refinance your house to get money out of it? The 10-year Treasury is at 0.62%. Do you want to buy a house at a great interest rate? They're making new loans. AndrewandTodd.com with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They actually make loans. If you're a senior citizen and you think you need to get money out of your house but never make another mortgage payment, you still have to pay your taxes, of course. AndrewandTodd.com, AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. You can call them up, 888-888-1172. Did that for the Steelers fans, 888-888-1172. I think, in fact, the Steelers may be the only club to miss the draft entirely, given that their Yinzers are running it. They may not know it's tonight. They may not, they don't see going anywhere, so they might just miss the whole thing, which would be appropriate. Overseas, Japan gained 1.5 points overnight. Hong Kong up 1%. The world's beginning to think, okay, we're going to have to, and oil is up to $15 a barrel. It's starting to recover even in the short term. Gold at $17.54. I think it's going to be a good day on the market. Yesterday it was up 456 points, The NASDAQ 232. The S&P 62. I think America is beginning to figure out, we'll figure out a roadmap here. No one has to go nuts. No one has to go crazy. We're going to get out of this. The states are going to have to reform. I'm going to talk with Representative Greg Walden about Oregon after the break. Stay tuned. Ask him the same questions I asked Congressman Waltz in the first hour. And then I'll ask Congressman McCaul in hour number 3, because when the states come for a bailout, reforms have to accompany that. It's that simple. The states that have been profligate cannot get money to cover their profligacy, but they can get money to keep their essential services going. The Congress, like Major League Baseball, should just listen to me. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway in the ReliefFactor.com studio, joined by my second of three congressmen today. Last hour, Representative Waltz from Florida. Next hour, Representative McCaul from Texas. This hour, Representative Walden from Oregon. I want to ask him the same questions. Good morning, Greg. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Hugh. Good to be with you this morning.
I am sampling Congress people from around the country so I can get an idea of the answer to particular questions. The first one of which is, do you think the Chinese Communist Party of the People's Republic of China owe money damages to people around the world?
Hey, they're no friend of ours. We should have known that a long time ago. And the answer, in short, is yes, whether it's them or the government. And there's no president can figure out how to recoup that better than this one. And with Peter Navarro, I mean, this is obvious to anybody that's been paying attention. Fortunately, President Trump's been paying attention, and a bunch of us have been as well. Especially when it comes to supply chain vulnerability. You know, you think about what happened after the '08 meltdown. We had a company emerge out of China, obviously state-sponsored, called Huawei. It now infects our communications networks. That's why we passed legislation to get it ripped out. We need to fund that. The president signed the bill a month or so ago now. That ought to be done so we can get rid of the vulnerability in our networks. Look at the vulnerability in our drug supply chain, our PPE. Mask gowns, we are crippled as an economy because we don't have enough masks. Are you kidding me? I mean, there's a lot we have to do here to get us on better footing.
All right, the next questions all involve the fact that the states are going to have to approach the federal Congress for money. They are in cardiac arrest in many places, and they don't have any tax revenue. And I've been looking last night at the California situation. It's dire. When you cut off personal income tax, which accounts for, I think, 65% of the general revenue, and state and sales tax, sales and use taxes are another 20%, the state's going to have a fiscal heart attack. So they and everyone else are going to come to the Congress for aid, and you're going to be able to condition that aid on reform.
We should. Yeah, we should. And the first place I'd start is, we pay about 50% of the public health budgets for states so that they're ready in case of a big public health crisis. Guess what we're in? And I think part of the conditioning has to look at how are states not better prepared to deal with this. We're looking at what we didn't get right, so we don't repeat that. But the other piece of this is, look, that's what the money to states was for, was to be ready with a public health system that can respond in a situation like this. And you discovered in California, most of their N95 masks were outdated because the elastic was probably beyond useful time in their own stockpile. We've got stockpile reform issues we're going to implement nationally to make sure that doesn't happen and modernize how we do our national stockpile. But then I look at, private sector. They're cutting jobs, they're furloughing, they're taking pay cuts at the top. All across the map, and states are going to have to think about, can they afford to do everything they've been doing? I was in business 20 years, radio business. My wife. When times were tough, you sucked it up and you made tough decisions, and you just had to scale back. I don't see the states doing that yet. They're trying to deal with this pandemic, but I'll tell you what, it's not like we're sitting on a freezer, sub-zero Nancy Pelosi freezer full of cash back here. These printing presses are smoking. They're running so fast, and the debt's going to be on the next generation. So I don't want the states to look at us as a big piggy bank with a never-ending balance.
Well, when they come, and they will come, I talked about it with Leader McConnell yesterday, I think there are two key things that need to happen. The first is that private business needs a federal statute preempting all state law concerning tort liability for COVID-related illness. And that means not that people can't screw up. There could be reckless, wanton negligence of someone down the road for which they ought to be held liable.
That's a different
but
deal.
you've got to preempt the plaintiff's bar from crippling business with class action suits about COVID. And the only way to do that is to federalize it and localize all claims in the Second Circuit or the D.C. Circuit or someplace like that. Do you see that on the agenda to make sure that the plaintiff's bar doesn't pick over the bones of American business at the end of this?
Yeah, they're salivating. Look, in the CARES Act, if you go to Section 2315, I believe, it's or 3215, there are liability protections and preemptions dealing with people who are basically first responders, healthcare providers in this situation. It has the carve out, as you said, that if it's willful criminal, that's a different deal. But if you're, Good Samaritan sort of law, we could simply expand that to business. If you're following the protocols, if you're doing the right things, then you ought to have protection here. Look, again, as having been a small business owner for 20 years, you want to take care of your people. You want to do the right thing. Nearly all of us do. If you give me the guidelines, I'll follow the guidelines. Most employers I know would do the same and are doing the same. And so they
But Congressman,
be subject
that
to frivolous suits.
that's true. But the only way to make that effective, literally the only way, I
Correct.
retired from the law like you're retired from radio, so I have no dog in this fight. But I've had lots of years doing this, and unless you preempt all state law and consolidate all claims in one federal district, the vultures will descend and they will simply blackmail people into paying tribute.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all, Hugh. I'm in full agreement.
All right, then let's move to the last thing on my list. I discussed it with the leader McConnell yesterday on the air. He caught a lot of heat, headline on Drudge, but it's the only way to go. There is no Chapter 8 in the bankruptcy code. There should be one for states that need to reorganize and jettison bad deals and expensive pension obligations and ridiculous contracts and to cut the pay of state employees. Will we get a bankruptcy code chapter that will be a tool that states that are against the wall can use, Congressman?
Well, I think we ought to consider that, absolutely. Why should states like mine, not that it doesn't have some issues, but we have to balance our budget. They work it out one way or another and have been pretty fiscally responsible in most categories, I could argue, in certain areas. But why should my taxpayers bail out states that, have had corrupt governors literally cycling in and out of prisons, that have given away the bank and the store and everything
Illinois.
else?
Are we talking about Illinois?
I didn't name names now, Hugh, but yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, that everybody's seen this coming for a long time. For a while, they couldn't even pay their lottery winners. I mean, so come on.
You're right, and Connecticut is number 2. Connecticut is right behind, not for corruption, but for in terms of indifference to the public fisc. And there's no way we should bail them out without reform.
That's right. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So who has the lead on this? How does this happen? Because, Nancy Pelosi just wants to write a blank check to the public employee unions. That's what that last 2 weeks have been about.
Well, here's your problem. With Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, you know who has the pen?
Yeah.
Chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And you know who was giving out pens when the president was convening the first coronavirus task force? Nancy Pelosi was giving out pens, the impeachment pens. So Jerry Nadler chairs the Judiciary Committee, right? I mean, that's who's going to write.
Good.
You think he's going to do a bankruptcy reform or tort reform? Heavens, no. I mean, this is.
Oh, good
this
Lord.
is the
But
problem.
so it's got to
Elections
come
are
from the
complicated.
Senate. Well, that's
right.
why I'm educating the public. It's got to come from the Senate,
Yep.
and
There you go.
the president and the leader have to insist on this, and members of the House like you have to make the arguments
Yep.
on the floor.
Yep.
Are there enough Democrats who will actually, the urgency of the state's condition will make them susceptible to these arguments. It's sort of like a borrower who's got to borrow. The terms that are imposed on the loan can be often quite onerous, correct?
That's true. Yeah. And I see, that's where I think you condition it. And I think it's responsible to condition. I think it's what taxpayers deserve. Frankly, taxpayers 3 generations out, because you think this debt's going away in the next generation. I mean, this is a burden that's going to be borne by our grandkids and beyond. And we've got to get reforms. You have to get reforms. People say, what are you going to do about the deficit and the debt? It's, you think about how it's skyrocketed. We have to bend the spending curve, and that means getting reforms and stop being everybody's piggy bank. I mean, you can't.
I don't want to ruin his reputation I don't want to ruin Congressman Jim McGovern's reputation by saying good things about him, but I will say there are some smart Democrats, and Jim McGovern is among them. And can they not combine with the best and the brightest of both houses on the Republican side and the best and the brightest of both houses on the Democratic side and come up with something that works?
I think we have to. Look, there are moments in history, and this is one of them, when you have to stand back and go, okay, what have we gotten right? What have we gotten wrong in this country over a period of time? What do we need to change? And let's go change it. And I think that involves supply chain, whether that, we're having this big war with China over who's going to develop the technology for autonomous vehicles. And guess who's standing in the way of that? The trial bar. We passed it unanimously when I was chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Republicans and Democrats across the committee, in the House, sent it over to the Senate, trial bar upends it. And we're stalled ever since. I mean, when you look at some of these other issues, we got to figure out how to produce things here. You look at how China's gobbling up rare earth minerals and everything else around the globe. Look at what they're doing in China, in Africa, what they're trying to do elsewhere. They have a plan. They are focused. They have never relented from that 100-year plan. They're closing in
And
on
they
it. We have to get smart.
they are taking over the nuclear power industry. They own all the enrichment. They're building the plants all over Africa. We are out of the business of enrichment. We are not enriching any uranium in America anymore. None.
That's exactly right. And then online, their agents are some of them putting out the false tests and scams and all that. And so, I mean, they're trying to affect our public opinion. They're trying to seize the world's greatest assets, our natural resources. I know in the West, I don't know what they've been doing directly, but I do know it's almost impossible to do mining. It's almost impossible to do forest management. You look at how our resources, our great natural resources, have been tied up, locked up, shut down, and now we're dependent on somebody else. We've gotten so dependent we can't even get an N95 mask. Now we are through the War Powers Act, or not War Powers Act, Defense Production Act, Procurement Act, that the president's invoked to make companies do this. And now we're waking up and saying, oh, okay, we got to change how we operate. But how did we get to this point?
It's a unique moment in time. I hope the smart people get together, you and Upton and a few other people from the Republicans and McGovern and a few other people from the Democrat, and just be smart. Congressman, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and good luck. Thank you. And time to tell you, friends, about Honor Bound Coffee. Don't forget Honor Bound Coffee. That's every cup of coffee you drink. If you get your coffee through the mail from Honor Bound Coffee, honorboundcoffee.com, subscribe to it. Then every cup of coffee you drink, the profit from it will go to support military families. Through credentialed, extraordinary military charities like the Semper Fi Fund, you will be, and the YMCA that's are on the military bases. That's what honorboundcoffee.com. Every dollar of profit goes to. Please get your coffee from them. Now, I also want to tell you about relieffactor.com, begun by the same great people who are doing that effort for the military family, Pete and Seth Talbot. Relieffactor.com, I took it in the first hour. I take it every day. I tell you about it 3 times a day to remind you, because people get up at different times during the day when they listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't forget to go over to your kitchen cabinet, take your Icarian Curcumin, Resveratrol, Omega, the 4 natural supplements I take. Now, there are a lot of other natural supplements out there. I'm not saying good or bad about them. These are the ones I trust because of their quality of their production, because of the efficacy of their use, because of their long-standing traditional use. These are the 4 you need. They're delivered to you in a beautifully designed package that's easy to open, easy to swallow. I do it every morning with my lukewarm coffee, and I'm telling you, if you're exercising the way you should, getting out with your mask on, walking, running, trundling along every day like you should be doing, relieffactor.com makes it easier to get that done. $19.95 gets you started on relieffactor.com. Want to remind you as well, if you're bored, go to nosafespaces.com. Great movie to watch while you're waiting for the draft today. Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla. Just head to nosafespaces.com. The code is SALE25, SALE25. You can also visit patternsofevidence.com. It's a great panel discussion about Exodus with Gretchen Carlson, Dennis Prager, Ann Graham Lotz, and our own Eric McTaxis. All you have to do is patternsofevidence.com. Thanks to all of our sponsors who are hanging with us through this period of time. People like LifeLock, Harry's.com. Thank you all. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, joined by former Missouri Senator Jim Talent, who knows about the Senate's leverage in the situation that is about to approach. The states are going to come, Senator Talent, asking for money that they desperately need. I believe it ought to be conditioned. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it ought to be conditioned. I think it ought to be limited too. And by the way, your interviews this week, you, and I'm not just blowing smoke at you. It's been a great week. This is how I'm catching up on what's going on in Washington. So congratulations. Now, okay, I would say, and it's clear this is where the leader is heading, and he's right. Okay, if we do any kind of a bailout, number one, it's for all the states. It's not just for the big ones, which is what they're going to try and do in the House, right? This is why we have a Senate. And I think Republican and Democratic senators are going to go, no, this ain't all going to California, New York, and Illinois. Forget it. That's number one. Number two, it ought to be for shortfalls in revenue from their revenue projections because of the pandemic, okay? Not all of it, because the state should bear some of the cost of this. And number three, we are not bailing out the state of Illinois for the actions of the Chicago machine in basically looting that state for the last 2 decades. I mean, that ought to be very, very clear. We're not bailing out states that have been mismanaged because they've got, frankly, corrupt machines that have been robbing them. I mean, we're not doing that. And I think it ought to make it very, very cleir.
In Connecticut, they have had successive 5.5% pay increases in a state that's broke. And they have they have tenure guaranteed through 2021 for every employee in the state. It's an absolutely ungovernable state because it's deep blue, and it is corrupt in the little c word. It's not go to jail corrupt. It's just completely in the grip of the public employee unions. And the Yankee Institute's done a lot of good work on this. I asked the leader, and he got a lot of heat yesterday when he agreed with me. Ought there not to be a Chapter 8 in the bankruptcy code that allows states to reorganize and jettison these onerous sweetheart deals they've done with retirees that burden future generations, Jim Talent?
Look, as far as I'm concerned, if I was still a senator from Missouri, I would say to them, look, you handle your own problems your own way. That's up to you, okay? But when you have mismanaged your states for decades, my taxpayers ain't bailing you out for that. Shortfalls in revenue because of the pandemic, yeah, we'll look at that for all the states. So all of them have revenue projections. They all have projections in January, what they're going to have the rest of the year and what they were going to have in fiscal 2021, right? So everybody has shortfalls. Yes, we're going to look at making up some of that. We've already helped with that. We'll help a little bit more. We're not going to do it all. You're going to have to bear some of the cost of that. But we're not going to make up for the problems you've had because you've mismanaged your states. My state didn't do that. Then my taxpayers aren't paying for that.
Do you realize that in California, per 10,000 people of population, they have 228 public employees? In Texas, they have 209. Do you know that New York has 316 public employees per 10,000 people? Why in the world would New York expect Texas to bail them out?
Or Missouri, exactly. Now, look, there are well-governed blue states, there are well-governed red states, and vice versa is true. This is not an opportunity for you to get my taxpayers to bail you out for the mistakes and the corruption you've had over the last 2 decades. And I would just make that very clear. That's why we have a Senate, okay? And by the way, if I was a House member of either party from a state that had done pretty well with its budget, I'm talking about House members, I wouldn't want to run against an opponent who said, oh, you're raising my taxes in order to pay because the Chicago machine in Illinois has been doing this for the last 2 decades?
Boy, if you captured that. Now, that's probably because you hate the Cubs and you're a Cardinals fan. Am I right about that?
I am a Cardinals fan. But Illinois is sort of the leader in this problem. And Pritzker.
They are the leader.
Pritzker say he wanted? I mean, what was it, $60 billion or something?
I don't know. You're absolutely right to focus on Illinois because they're the worst. Connecticut is second. California is third. California is not big corruption, capital C, illegal. It's just in the grip of public employee pension. I mean, it's just they have been mismanaged for decades because you can't say no to the teachers. You can't say no to the tribes. You can't say no to the prison guards. You can't. They'll crush you, right? That's what's happened there.
I wouldn't even pinpoint. I mean, if it was me, I wouldn't even pinpoint because there's lots of problems that have caused this in lots of states. And some states have dealt responsibly. Some states with Republican and Democratic governors have dealt with this responsibly. Others haven't. So the good news is, we know what they were all projecting for their revenues. Okay, it's usually a matter of public record, and then we can look at where their revenues are going to be. There's a shortfall, and I think we ought to say, look, going into this, we'll make up some of that. Okay, but we're not going to make it all up. You're going to have to bear some of the cost, and we are not making up for the liabilities that you've accrued all these years, wherever they come from, because you haven't managed your finances. I would say that is an absolute non-starter, and I also like your idea of conditioning it on some kind of general tort relief. Now, there's only a limit to how far you can go with that, but I think some of that is a good thing. I agree with you.
Yeah, we could preempt every claim involving COVID and move it to the Southern District of New York or the District of Columbia and establish a federal standard that would apply. And then we would have a national standard, because some people will screw up and deserve liability, but most people don't. And we cannot let the vultures, the worst part of the plaintiff's bar, and there's some good plaintiff's lawyers out there, don't get me wrong, but we can't let them cripple the recovery. Jim Talent, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Follow him at Jim Talent. Follow me to the next hour. Chuck Todd joins me. We'll talk about this state and federal bailout issue with Chuck when we come back. Stay tuned. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. I want to warn my guest, Chuck Todd, that if he hears a scream around 9:30 tonight down the river, it will be me when the Browns use the 10th selection in the draft not to take a left tackle. That will be me. I don't know about you, but this is like an oasis in a desert, the NFL draft, Chuck Todd. We have some sports to watch.
I hear you. I'm of mixed minds on this. I'm somebody who thinks that the best shot we have at an NFL season, I envision like a 10-game season that begins around New Year's and ends in mid-March or something like that. An 8-game college football season that's conference only. I do think we're going to get it, but not in the fall. I think
Interesting. Well, the draft is tonight. One way, I've got a plan to save baseball. Before we get to politics, let me tell you what it is. We need
yes.
2 leagues.
My football schedule, so go for it.
Okay, we take 4 stadiums: Detroit, Cleveland, and the 2 in the Chicago, and that's the American League. We take 4 stadiums in the West, LA, Anaheim, Phoenix, and San Diego. That's the National League, and the 32 teams get 32 hotels, and they play all their games in those 4 stadiums, which you can get to on buses, and you keep every fan away. But you play this season.
Did you see though the comments? I take your point on this, and I think if baseball players didn't have families, I'd say that's a great plan. But I heard a whole bunch of them going, "You're telling me I could be quarantined away from my family for the entire season?" That's what one of the players was noting, that this plan, and it's just like, you're not going to get a lot of us that are going to want to walk away from our families that long.
Chuck, you know what happens when athletes take a year off? You know what happens to them. They really, I don't know if they've thought through what happens if they take a full year off. Their skill sets will simply, the younger ones won't be impacted, but the folks who are at the peak of their game and the pitch, it's really catastrophic.
Trust me. Look, there's, ask somebody older than us, and they'll tell you the Korean cost Ted Williams the all-time home run record.
Yep.
There's going to be conversations, LeBron might not get his 4th title because of this, or a 5th title because of this type of thing. I mean, they're in the same way when we can have these conversations. In the same way people used to talk about the players that missed playing during World War II or during Korea War, and what that would have done. I have a feeling in 20 years you'll have little debates like that.
People think it might be silly to spend time on this, but this matters a lot. I love your 8-game college football season. So you would jettison August, conference play only.
Well, that's the point. Most conferences play 8 conference games. Some do 9, but you go down to 8 only. I mean, you cut it, you narrow it down. You're narrowing down if you're just playing your conference games, you should be narrowing down your travel, right? I mean, there's a few conferences who aren't geographically that well aligned, but for the most part, right, ACC, SEC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 are somewhat geographically aligned. So you'd have that as well. Look, I think the NCAA president's made it clear, and if you can't have kids on campus, you're not going to have sports. So I think you're not getting the kids on campus until the spring.
This is disastrous. I hadn't thought about this. I was talking to a college president yesterday, Larry Oren, who comes on once a week.
It's going to be a killing field, Hugh, in the university community. I don't think people realize. I think, look, I'll do it, and we'll stay in sports so people can think of it that way. You know how many NCAA Division I basketball programs there are? There's over 300, I think, okay? Think about your Marist, your Fordhams, AU, GW. Think about all those schools that have basketball programs that you think are, how many of those athletic programs are going to go away? And that's if the university survives. Okay?
Yeah. And in fact,
I'm just thinking about, and I say this with, I love all these, I went to gym. But you are not going to prioritize as much as those sporting. Look, in Alabama, it pays for a lot, but at Creighton, if it's not good, it costs money. And I think I don't think we realize what's going to happen to the 4-year college mindset.
Yeah, I asked my brother the other day because his son-in-law is the head coach of a new program, a new Division I program. Second year, they did pretty well. It's down in Miami. St. Vincent, I can't remember the name. It's St. Mary's. And it's not St. Mary's. I'll come up with it. And they're in the second year of their existence. I don't really know how you come back from this if you don't play in the fall.
I think it's difficult. And again, I go back to the money situation. I mean, if who's going to fund this stuff? And the trickle down
out of it. I mean, you have Nike underwrites a lot. Nike and Under Armour underwrite a lot of these basketball programs with massive shoe contracts. But how many of those contracts are going to come in? You have the TV dollar issues. There's still some, that legacy money is going to be there for the bigger programs. But these smaller programs, and how do you bail them out?
Okay. This is fascinating. We got to get to politics, because I just talked with Jim Talent, who articulated what the leader said to me yesterday, that there will be no bailout for the Chicago machine. On the other hand, there are a bunch of Democrats, and I know these people, Jim McGovern and people like that. They're very smart. They know that the states need money, and Republicans know that the states need money. There has to be a big bailout of revenue shortfalls accompanied by reforms. Does the Congress have the capacity, Chuck Todd, to anoint their smartest 4 Republicans and their smartest 4 Democrats in the House and the same in the Senate to figure it out?
What evidence have you seen that this Congress, and I'm not going to get into who's worse at working with the other side, so we won't have that. We'll set that debate aside. What evidence that you can see? I mean, look at how painful the last 15 days was watching that negotiation. It turned out exactly as we knew it would have turned out. They'll throw a bunch more money in it. Got it. They're going to say, and they're going to claim they've scored their political points. You're like, what did you accomplish? You did nothing other than eat away at your own credibility, a little bit with your own bases and a little bit with the other side. But you accomplished nothing, and you still haven't figured out how to work on some big structural issues. Look, I'll be honest. I don't think anybody on Capitol Hill fully understands the economic fire that's happening.
I was looking at California's revenues last night.
Having these little things. I mean, you've got teacher salaries. This idea that you're going to give money to the base, how are you going to pay teachers?
Yeah, I was looking at California's revenues
Police
last
and
night.
Fire.
Yeah, but it's also public pensions, retirees, and so something has to happen. And I'm thinking of the 1787 model. I really am, Chuck, where they went inside a room. It was 53 people. They shut the windows. They did not communicate with anyone. They came out with a plan. But luckily, those 50-plus people were genius. We haven't got 50 geniuses, but we got 5 to 10 in each party. Should we not send them away to hammer this out? Because it has to happen.
I would love to say. I mean, you're right. You have guys that understand some complicated things, whether it's Mike Braun or Mark Warner, who I think are both sort of, are the type of people that. I mean, I've had conversation with them. It's like, frankly, the employment laws in this country are so out of date. Employment law in this country, the way the workers' comp, all this stuff assumes singular jobs for people, when the gig economy is, it's just like the federal government is not even, the IRS is not even really aligned with what today's economy. So there really does need to be a huge rethinking of employment law in this country.
There needs to be a huge rethinking of tort law as well. We cannot have the plaintiffs' bar descend like vultures on the bones of business at a state-by-state level. They've got to concentrate. Some people will deserve to get sued.
Well, sure. I mean, and I agree. We don't want to have like a whole bunch of lawsuits litigating how to rescue things. I mean, I don't think that's a efficient way to go about this. But I just, I don't have a lot of faith in these guys right now. I think you're gonna. We'll see. Maybe who might surprise us. I think you could see a compact of governors come together. A Gavin Newsom, Larry Hogan, Mike DeWine, Andrew Cuomo, and basically punt Congress, or you pluck a couple of people from Congress that are worth a darn. But it may be the states themselves that go through this.
Those governors cannot pry the money out of the Congress. You've got to go name, and I'd be interested if you did this. If Chuck Todd were to name and Hugh Hewitt were to name the 8 people.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Look, I will say this: Congress needs to find a better role in this crisis so far, because I think they have been, they have not. I don't think anybody in Congress has found their role yet, and I know part of it is not being here, not being involved. Governors every day have something to focus on, and the House and the Senate guys don't. And this would, give them something. But
look at what worked.
Look, they should do it, but I just don't buy that it will. I don't think the 4 leaders trust each other enough to allow it to happen.
I look at what worked. Marco Rubio and Ben Cardin working together worked. So go back and find the people.
I agree that it worked, but Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer don't trust each other.
Of course
not.
And
as long as those two don't trust each other, I don't think, and the way And the way they, I don't think people below them will work well together. I just don't. They'll try, but I think at the end of the day, Schumer and McConnell inability to work well together blows any of that stuff up.
1787, the states weren't working together. I mean, we just got to lock them in a room, but they got to be smart. They got to be diverse. They got to come from all over the country, and they got to be left alone by us, the media. Chuck Todd will be watching at 1 and at 5 today on MSNBC. And, of course, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Come right back, America. We save baseball and college sports. We'll continue our work after the break.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Let me check the markets for you. Brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. You hear me tell you about him twice a day, some days. A lot of you right now have to go and try and find money from your house and refinance. And one of the few people that are doing that, Sierra Pacific Mortgage, andrewandtodd.com. They will at least get you right up to the place where you can lock when mortgage rates stabilize. I think they have stabilized. I think they are making loans, but they are direct lenders. They're not a broker house. I know Andrew Del Rey is a real person. Todd Avakian is a real person. They're good friends of mine. I've known them for years. They've done all my loans. If you need to borrow money from your house, or you want to buy a house, or because they are definitely doing loans for purchases, or you need a reverse mortgage, andrewandtodd.com, 888-1172. The big story of the day is that economists and investors have been bracing for the economic data that is coming out in April. And it's going to be just ugly, terrible, awful. And unemployment is going to surpass 16.5% in May, according to Morgan Stanley. That just, again, remember, it is passing. It will pass. And some companies in America have already emerged very, very strong. You know, I'm an investor in Amazon, so I always check it. It's a proxy for tech. They're soaring in the pre-market today, and I think it's because Netflix soared yesterday, and people are figuring out there are big winners and big losers in the market, and the economy will sort itself out, and tax revenues will start to flow again. We'll figure it out. But people have to put down their cudgels and just deal with reality, like Jim Talent did. We're not going to bail out Chicago. They're going to have to make changes. Connecticut is bailed out. Connecticut is maybe the worst run state after Illinois. It's not going to get bailed out. And so we need tort reform. It's got to happen. But if you need money, andrewandtodd.com. If you didn't catch it, I've saved baseball. I've been putting my commissioner hat on. And the way to save baseball is to organize the American League in 4 cities, Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago, with 4 stadiums. And you can drive between those in buses. You don't have to fly. You can keep the buses clean. You need 16 hotels in those 4 cities, 4 in each city, 8 in Chicago, 4 in Detroit, 4 in Cleveland. And you play all the games in those, all the American League games in those 4 stadiums. You keep everyone separate, and you keep them doctored up, and you, until the fans can come back, you play without fans. And you put the National League out west in L.A., Anaheim, Phoenix, and San Diego. Again, it's a little bit of a drive from L.A. to Phoenix, but you can do that. These players all grew up in the minors, where a 7-hour bus drive in a congestion bus is fine. You take 2 or 3. You don't have to fly. Maybe you do fly. I don't know. But you can find 16 hotels, and you just start playing the games. Doubleheader every day in each stadium. And you play as many as you can, and at the end of the season, however many games you've got, I mean, there'll be rain delays in some of these. I tried to figure out a better cluster of stadiums with coverage. You can't go to New York. New York can't do this. You got to go to where Detroit is peaked. Cleveland is okay. Chicago is okay. L.A., Anaheim, San Diego, and Phoenix are okay. They're not great. But you got to get baseball going. Dwayne, what do you make of my plan? Is Dwayne alive? Is Dwayne asleep?
No, I'm here. I'm here. I see the point you're making. I think it could work. I think it is very important therapeutically for the country to get back to some sport, to be able to kind of distract from the dreariness of everyday life now. I'm not sure it would work. I'm just not sure it would work.
I think you need 32 hotels and 64 doctors, or 128 doctors. I'm going to do math that's going to outstrip the Steelers fans here pretty soon. But you need testing machines like they have at the White House, and you could make this work, and boy, does the country need some sports. And this is the easiest, most sanitary way to do it, I think.
Did you see the picture I sent you last night of baseball in 1918 Spanish flu style?
No.
There's actually a Getty file picture that's floating around of a batter wearing a mask, a catcher with his face mask with a face mask under it covering his mouth and nose, and the umpire in position wearing a mask as well.
Well, that's what we would do. We need baseball, and we need the draft tonight. And just to make my point, Cleveland, Draft a left tackle at number 10. Don't screw this up. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by patternsofevidence.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. It's draft day in the middle of the plague. At least we have something to watch tonight. You'll hear me screaming across the country if the Browns don't draft a left tackle at number 10. But let's get back to the government. Congressman Mike McCaul is from Congress's 10th Congressional District in Texas. I've had on Representative Michael Waltz from Florida, Representative Greg Walden from Oregon, and Congressman McCaul, welcome. You are representing the great state of Texas this morning. Great to have you back.
Yeah, you had great Texas fans. ZZ Top, LaGrange is in my district.
Are they? Huh.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I have asked each of the previous members the same questions I'm going to ask you. The first is, should the Communist Chinese Party of the People's Republic of China be subject to money damage lawsuits in the United States by people injured by the COVID?
I think that's one of the options we're looking at. After 9/11, Congress passed a specific provision to allow the victims to file lawsuits against, the Saudis and people responsible. And so I think that's one of the options we're looking at. When I lay out the case as to what they did, the immediate response is, okay, how are you going to hold them accountable? I think that's one of the things. We're looking at a myriad of options, though, to punish China, the Chinese Communist Party, I should say, not the Chinese people, for what they did in the worst cover-up in human history.
Now, I agree with that characterization. They own a lot of state-sponsored enterprises, SEEs or SSOs, state-sponsored organizations. I think if you made them liable as well, they hide behind state sovereignty doctrines, but the federal government can strip away that state sovereignty tomorrow, can't they?
We could. They're also a developing nation under the United Nations, which entitles them to World Bank loans that they then, in turn, lend to countries in Africa and Latin America for a much higher interest rate, just ripping them off. And the other thing, Hugh, they're doing right now is using their state-subsidized, apparatus. They're gobbling up financial institutions all over the world that are very undervalued now, but we know when the economy rebounds, they're going to be worth a lot of money. We got to really keep the eye on China. They're the biggest long-term threat to the national security interest of the United States.
Well said. Now to restarting the country, we know that the state governments are going to need help. I've looked at the California revenue forecast. It's just butchered because it depends upon personal income and sales taxes. And so they're going to be completely upside down, and that's going to happen all over the country. And I talked to the leader yesterday, Leader McConnell, and he said, look, they may need a new chapter in the bankruptcy code. And he got all sorts of hell for that, but it's just the ability to jettison bad contracts and the ability to reorganize. Do you think when the states come calling that you have to condition the aid on thoroughgoing reforms of things like out-of-control state pension plans?
Well, I think just like the SBA program and distress loan program, that we need to look at the spreadsheets that they're, how they're conducting business, and that should be conditioned on where they get funding or not. I think, in my state, I got a Republican governor. I think he's running it pretty well. We left that out of this bill we're voting on today because we've already allocated so much money, there's no way they could spend it all. That is something I think we'll be looking at in the next tranche, but I do think it's wise to condition it on states and localities that are fiscally responsible.
Now, former Senator Talent just said, I do not expect my former citizens of Missouri, the people he represented, he's still a Missourian, to pay for the corrupt Chicago machine. That crystallized it for me. There are some states that have been very fiscally responsible. Ohio is one of them. Your state of Texas is another one. And then there are some profligate, corrupt states like Illinois and Connecticut. And California's in between because they've got the public employee unions like limpet mines attached to the public fisc. I don't know if it's possible for this Congress, as partisan it is, to reach an agreement, but do you think it's possible that we could do the 1787 thing and select a few people and send them away to a locked room with no press around and have them come up with a comprehensive solution?
Yeah, and my complaint is that we're throwing all this money out, but with little strings attached. And, I voted against the bailout in 2008 because it was rewarding bad conduct, malfeasance. And I would argue that this is not like the bailout because they, through no fault of their own, this virus out of Wuhan got thrown at them. However, I do think it's appropriate to condition, assistance at the federal level on behavior and fiscal responsibility. And That's going to be a Republican position, but as you know, with the Dems being in charge of the House with Speaker Pelosi, a very difficult thing to do.
But the states are genuinely going to be demanding something happen. And if we articulate early, we being the center right, that we need a new chapter in the bankruptcy code for states, and we cannot bail out, you can't reward terrible fiscal practices over decades. You can't leave the public employee unions untouched. You can't pay ridiculous pensions to people. I think the American people will buy that. They know that you've got to tighten your belt and not be a spendthrift, right, Congressman?
I agree. They don't want to see us pouring money down a drain. And, I think there's an opportunity here to change the behaviors of certain states and localities that don't spend the federal money wisely. That is the difference in my line between, in my view, between a lifeline, if you will, to get them through the crisis versus a bailout to just give them more money to spend in a bad system. So we got to reform the system, and condition the systems.
I want to look out a few months when businesses that have struggled through, largely aided by the PPP, which is the best thing that's come out of this from the Congress, and it was bipartisan. Marco Rubio and Ben Cardin put it together, and Republicans and Democrats have funded it, and it's working. I mean, 1 million businesses have already gotten PPP loans, and another 1 million will get more loans. It's working. It's good. But at the end, when they stand back up, the plaintiffs' lawyers are going to arrive, and they're going to be like vultures on the bones of businesses that are broken. Unless the Congress steps in, preempts all the state tort law, and says if you want to make a COVID claim against a business, you're going to do it in federal court, I don't know, in the Southern District of New York or the District of Columbia, and you're going to live by these rules, or maybe find a jurisdiction that's got enough judges. California's not it. There aren't any judges there because they haven't had any judges for years. But what do you think? Can we get liability protection against the spurious claims of plaintiffs' lawyers in the coming months?
No, sure, and I think consolidating it in one jurisdiction would make sense. And I think nothing. I was a federal prosecutor for many years, and I mean nothing sickens American people more than these plaintiffs' lawyers trying to make money off a crisis like this. I think liability protections would be an absolutely great idea, and consolidating it in one jurisdiction, just like patent cases all go to the Eastern District of Texas, right? So. Why not propose that sort of idea? I would prefer it to be in a more conservative appellate circuit like the Fifth Circuit, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I did not know you were a U.S. attorney, so let's talk about that for a second. People don't understand what we're talking about. The state governments have their own trial systems, and they usually control tort law, and that's fine. We're a federalist society. But when you have consolidation into one district, people get justice who are genuinely injured by the reckless and the malicious and the malign, but you'll have judges who are competent to say, get out of here. Big law firm that's trying to soak this poor little business. And I'm open to putting it anywhere, and the Fifth Circuit makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and the to your point, what you're talking about is a federal judge. That's all he does, because usually a federal judge, their docket is criminal cases first, and then they get to civil liability, and they're not exactly experts in one particular area like this would be, or like patent law would be in the Eastern District of Texas, where those cases are handled. It seems to me that's a really good proposal, and liability protection is really fundamental to protecting the taxpayer as well, including those who could be harmed by these lawsuits, but to those who they have meritorious claims that could be determined by a federal judge who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, because there will be what tort lawyers are going to do. Plaintiffs' lawyers are going to allege someone was negligent, and they're going to hold up a business, and they're going to pay him off, and the insurance company is going to pay him off to go away. But if you raise the standard of liability so that if you can demonstrate a safe harbor level of conduct, masks and wiping down and stuff like that, they would be immune, and then the businesses could afford to say, "Get the hell out of here, lawyer! I'm not going to pay you ransom." I know, cold water was thrown on this by Chuck Todd or Jim Talent. Jerry Nadler is head of judiciary. He's not exactly free of the plaintiffs' lawyers, but these states are going to be desperate, aren't they, Congressman? They're going to need money.
They're going to need some liability protection, or even heightening the standard to gross negligence, which is a threshold. That would. But as you know, the Democrats are one of their major donors and supporters of the trial lawyers, and that's the inherent problem. I wish we had the majority in the House. We could certainly pass something like that. We looked at this with health care, with medical liability reform. We did that in my state. We put a cap of $250,000, and you know what? It's really helped our health care system and stopped the frivolous lawsuits.
So my last question, do you think the pressure from the states for rescue money, given their revenue shortfall, will be sufficient to move your Democratic colleagues towards genuine reform? Because I don't see the Republicans moving unless that money has strings attached to it.
And I agree, and that's why that was a big debate on this tranche, was we left out state and locals. Well, number one, Hugh, we have appropriated so much money for them, they haven't spent it all. So it wasn't necessary to throw more when they haven't expended what we've already appropriated. We will be looking at this issue for the next vote, and it seems to me the great compromise here would be, okay, we're going to help out state and locals, but we want strings attached to that funding. And I think that's exactly where Leader McConnell's going to be going, and I think Leader McCarthy will be on the same page with McConnell.
I'll add one question. Is it possible for the two leaders, the Speaker and Senator McConnell, to designate a team of the smart people, 4 and 4 and 4 and 4, to go off and figure this out? Because that's the only way it gets done, is if you do the 1787 model, Mike McCaul. You got to go find the smartest people and lock them in a room and tell them to come out with a deal.
Yeah, and anytime we have big spending bills like omnibus bills, as you know, there's a lot of other stuff thrown in there. And what we have is what's called a Four Corners Agreement, which would be anything that's, say, foreign affairs related. That means that the chair and the ranking members in the House and Senate have to agree to this before it moves forward. It seems to me that the relevant committees of jurisdiction, you could have four corners agreeing to the process moving forward. This really needs to be bipartisan at this critical time. We're in a crisis. And I'm glad that the bill we're voting on today is not loaded up with a lot of Christmas tree ornaments that have nothing to do with coronavirus. It's all strictly related to COVID-19.
That is good news, and I hope they get the team of rivals together to figure this out. Congressman Mike McCaul from Texas, thank you for joining me. Follow him on Twitter at Rep McCaul. Follow me as well to relieffactor.com. That's the only place you can order online to get that, which I take every morning in the first hour and remind you about in hours 2 and 3. I do it every day, 3 times a day. Why? Because you're going out the door at different times in the country. Some of you are still working and going out the door every morning early. In Seattle, you got a long drive, less now because there's no traffic. In L.A., the people who are still working, who live in Moreno Valley, they're getting on the 55, and they're just 91 to 55 and barreling on in. It's the best commuting ever, unfortunately. But whether you're commuting or whether you're walking or exercising, relieffactor.com will make it easier for you. Natural supplements, the only one I take, the 4 Icarian, Curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Go and get it, take it every day, and then come right back after the break. I'll be right back for the last segment with the president of the City of Hope. What is happening in the hospitals of America? Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. We are in the middle of a crisis. It's a medical crisis, and for more than 100 years, the City of Hope has stood like a lighthouse in the middle of crises. Originally tuberculosis, then cancer, then AIDS. Now I'm joined by Dr. McCaul, Caliguiri, who is the president of City of Hope. Good morning, doctor, the chief physician there. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Oh, my goodness, the phone is terrible. We may have to hang up and call you back. Doctor. No, we're going to have to hang up and call you right back. In the meantime, I'll read the history of the City of Hope. It began in 1913 when a group of volunteers were spurred by the compassion for people with those with TB, and they established the Consumptive Release Association. They raised money to start a free sanitarium, and that free sanitarium has flourished over the years, first into a cancer center, then an HIV center. And now I think Dr. Caliguiri is back with me. Are you there, doctor? Oops. There you are. Doctor, welcome back.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Tell me what it's like right now at the epicenter. I know the City of Hope must be turning to face this crisis. What are you doing? How's it feel from an epicenter of care?
Well, our focus is the safety of our patients. And our patients, as you said, we've turned to cancer. And so our patients are cancer patients. And that's our top priority, is the safety of our patients. So what we've done is, believe it or not, we've been able to, in our hospital, there's not a single person infected with the virus. There's not a staff or a faculty member infected with the virus, nor any patients infected with the virus. So we're incredibly vigilant in the hospital, making it a very, very safe haven for our cancer patients who, as you know, already have an immune system which is depressed due to the disease itself and the therapies that we have to give our patients. So being COVID-free, if you will, is critically important to the patients.
Now, Dr. Caliguiri, how did you achieve that? Because that is obviously the best practices. If you can establish that at City of Hope, that means there is a best practice set available for other hospitals. How did you do it?
Well, fortunately for us and for our cancer patients, we're largely a cancer-only hospital. And as you may be aware, and as our audience may be aware, cancer patients are at incredibly high risk for infection to begin with. And once they're infected, this becomes the possibility of a fatal infection under normal circumstances. So under normal circumstances, we're incredibly sensitive to the possibility of infections. So hand hygiene, face masks, vaccinations, the whole culture is one of prevention of infection because of the diminished immune system. And then when the virus hit, of course, rapid testing. We have a test which is a 3-hour turnaround. No one comes into the hospital without having that test first outside of the hospital, get cleared, and then come in.
Tell me about that, because that seems to me to be the secret going forward until we have almost certainly effective therapies, and it will remain best practices for the immunocompromised, right? You're going to have to do that. Where did that test come from? How much does it cost? How easy is it to administer, and can they scale its deployability?
Well, the test we're using is widely deployed throughout most of the hospitals right now. And the difference, Hugh, is that because we're a cancer-only hospital, we are not by nature faced with all of the folks in the community who have a cough, have a fever, fatigue, and headache, and need to go to an emergency room. They go to a general medical center and a community hospital, or to an academic medical center where they have all sorts of specialties. So we have an advantage at City of Hope in that the only patients that come to us are cancer patients. And as a consequence of that, the numbers that we're seeing are smaller. So it's not, I think every community hospital now has access, or most should have access to a test that has a turnaround in a few hours. The issue
I
is
am
who's
curious,
coming
Doctor.
into the emergency room. Yeah.
I'm curious, have the community of cancer patients turned to you and other cancer hospitals like MD Anderson, realizing, and in other words, you have patients being shifted to City of Hope from other hospitals in order to take advantage of the natural defenses that you've already built into your system?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're just doing that now. So the first thing was kind of, if you will, lockdown. Make sure that you're free of infection, and that's what we've done over the last 2 months. Get the test up and running,
get the patients all tested, test anyone who comes in. And now we're at a point where, we have beds available. Best U.S. News World Report, best cancer hospital in the West. And I think that's true for some of the other cancer hospitals only across the country. But, some of them are stricken into cities like New York City and larger cities where, they're just, the numbers are just overwhelming. Fortunately, where we are in Los Angeles, the numbers have not yet been overwhelming. So, we do have staff free of infection at our hospital. We do have faculty free of infection at our hospital. In some of our larger cities, that's just not the case, where there's just so many people carrying the infection. So we're trying to make it clear to those across the country and, of course, in Los Angeles and across California that we can help and we can provide a safe haven.
Dr. Caliguiri, keep up that's terrific news. We needed some good news today, and that's terrific news. There are other institutions, but City of Hope is showing the way as it has for more than 100 years. Thank you. Don't go anywhere, America. Watch the NFL draft tonight. Remember, Cleveland Browns, a left tackle at number 10. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam.